Welcome to the channel Coinexa Vault, and before we dive in, I want you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what I'm about to share with you is the kind of information that most people will never find out, the kind of secret that hides in plain sight, sitting unnoticed in old jars, forgotten drawers, and dusty piggy banks all across the country, and today we are talking about a coin that looks so ordinary, so unremarkable, so absolutely invisible to the untrained eye, that millions of people have already spent it without ever knowing what they had, and I am talking about the 1999 Lincoln Penny, a coin that most people would toss into a fountain without a second thought, but here is the jaw-dropping, life-changing, almost unbelievable truth. Certain versions of the 1999 Lincoln Penny have been valued by collectors and numismatic experts at up to $16 million, yes, you heard that absolutely right, $16 million for a single penny, a coin that is supposed to be worth 1 cent, and right now, as you're sitting there watching this, there is a real and genuine possibility that one of these pennies is somewhere within your reach, and if you think that sounds crazy, then stick with me, because by the time this video is over, you are going to understand exactly why this tiny copper coin carries such an enormous price tag, and trust me, you are going to want to stay until the very end of this video because the coins coming up after this one are even more shocking, even more valuable, and the stories behind them will absolutely blow your mind. I'm not going to tell you the values just yet because I want you to feel the suspense, the same suspense that coin collectors feel when they crack open an old collection and find something that makes their hands shake, so keep watching, keep listening, and do not touch that remote. Now, let's go all the way back to 1999, a year that feels both recent and strangely distant now. It was the final year of a millennium, the world was buzzing with Y2K panic, technology was changing everything, and the United States Mint was operating at an absolutely furious pace, pumping out billions of pennies to meet the demands of a nation still heavily dependent on cash transactions. And the Denver Mint, identified by the small d mint mark just below the date on the obverse side of the coin, was one of the hardest working facilities in the entire country, producing over 8 billion pennies in 1999 alone, 8 billion, and when you are producing coins at that kind of staggering, almost incomprehensible volume, things happen, mistakes happen, and those mistakes, those tiny beautiful glorious mistakes, are exactly what transforms an ordinary 1-cent coin into a $1 million treasure. The 1999 Lincoln Penny in its standard form is a perfectly common coin. There is nothing special about it at first glance. It features the classic obverse portrait of Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, designed by Victor David Brenner, whose initials VDB famously appear on the coin, and on the reverse, you have the Lincoln Memorial design that was introduced in 1959 to commemorate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth, a design so familiar that most Americans have looked at it thousands of times without ever truly seeing it, and that right there is the problem, because familiarity breeds blindness, and blindness costs fortunes. Now here is where things get incredibly interesting, incredibly exciting, and for some incredibly lucky people, incredibly life-changing. Among the billions of 1999 pennies that were struck at the Denver Mint, a small number of them carry what numismatists call a wide AM reverse variety, and if you have never heard that term before, let me explain it to you in a way that will make you immediately grab every 1999 penny you can find and inspect it with fresh, hungry eyes. On the reverse of the Lincoln Memorial penny, at the very bottom of the coin, you will find the words United States of America, and within that inscription, you need to look specifically at the letters A and M in the word America. Now on a normal, standard circulation penny from this era, those two letters should appear very close together, almost touching, almost kissing, and this is known as the close AM design. This is what you expect to find, this is what hundreds of millions of ordinary pennies look like, but on the rare, extraordinary, heart-stopping 1999 wide AM variety, those two letters are spaced further apart. There is a visible, noticeable gap between the A and the M, and this gap exists because of a die mixing error, a situation in which the Denver Mint accidentally used a proof die, a die intended for specially polished collector coins, on regular business strike production, and that simple, almost laughably small mistake, a gap between two letters that you could cover with the tip of a ballpoint pen, is what separates a 1-cent coin from a coin worth $16 million to the right collector, and that is the kind of detail that makes this hobby absolutely electric, because it means that fortune is not always hiding in grand places, sometimes it is hiding in the spacing between two tiny letters on a coin you have probably already touched 100 times. The story of how these coins came to be discovered reads almost like a detective novel. For years coin collectors and researchers knew that proof sets from 1998, 1999, and 2000 contained examples of the wide AM reverse, because that was the design intentionally used for proof coins. But what no one initially realized was that this proof die had also been mistakenly used to strike regular business coins meant for everyday circulation, and when researchers began to systematically examine 1999 pennies under high-powered magnification and discovered that wide AM specimens existed among the general circulation strikes, the numismatic community absolutely erupted, because suddenly every penny jar in America became a potential treasure chest, every old coin collection became worth a second and third look, and the FOMO, the fear of missing out, that gripped collectors was completely and utterly justified. Consider for a moment what it would feel like to discover one of these coins. Imagine sitting at a table with a loop in your hand, going through a bag of old pennies that your grandmother kept in a cookie tin on the top shelf of her kitchen cabinet, and then suddenly, there it is, the wide AM, that beautiful slightly wider gap between two letters, and your heart starts pounding because you know what you are looking at, you know what it means. And in that single breathless moment, your entire financial reality could be about to change forever, and that is not a fantasy. That is something that has actually happened to real people, ordinary people who simply took the time to look, to pay attention, to respect the possibility that extraordinary things can hide in ordinary places. When examples of the 1999 wide AM penny have appeared at major auction houses, the bidding has been absolutely ferocious, collectors from around the world competing for a coin that once passed through someone's hands as nothing more than everyday change, and the certified examples, those that have been professionally authenticated and graded by services like PCGS or NGC, have commanded prices that leave audiences speechless, because the combination of the error type, the rarity of surviving examples in high grades, and the incredible story behind the coin creates a perfect storm of collector desire that drives values into the stratospheric range, up to and including that astonishing $16 million figure that we mentioned at the very start of this video. And here is something I want you to do right now, before this video is even over. Go find your old coin jars, go look through that drawer in the kitchen where you toss your loose change, go check your old piggy banks, and pull out every single 1999 penny you can find, and when you find one, use a magnifying glass or even just your phone camera on maximum zoom, look at the reverse, find the word America, and stare at the space between the A and the M, because that tiny gap could be the most important thing you look at all year. It could be the thing you tell your grandchildren about, the moment everything changed, because history has proven over and over again that these coins are out there. They are in circulation, they are in collections, they are sitting in places where nobody has thought to look, and the only thing standing between you and a $16 million discovery is the willingness to look. Now before we move on, I want you to stay locked in because what is coming up next in this video is going to make everything we just talked about feel like just the warm-up. We have 2 more coins to cover today, and I promise you, the stories behind them are going to make your jaw drop even further, the values are going to make your eyes go wide, and the details are the kind that make even seasoned coin experts stop and shake their heads in disbelief. I am not going to give you the numbers yet, because I want the suspense to build. I want you to feel what collectors feel when they know something incredible is coming but they haven't seen it yet, so do not go anywhere, do not skip ahead, because every single second of what comes next is worth your full and undivided attention. And if you thought the 1999 Lincoln penny was extraordinary, just wait until you hear what we have in store for you. Because the next coin on our list is going to take everything up another level entirely, and then the one after that is going to be the grand finale that this whole video has been building toward. So stay with us, stay curious, stay hungry, because Coinexa Vault is just getting started. Next 1991 Lincoln penny, and if you are still here from the last segment, then you already know that this channel does not play games when it comes to rare coins. We go deep, we go real, and we go valuable, and what I am about to tell you about the 1991 Lincoln penny is going to make you want to sprint to your nearest coin jar, because this coin, this seemingly harmless, utterly forgettable 1-cent piece from the year 1991, has been valued by serious numismatic collectors at an almost Incomprehensible $28 million, 28 million, for a penny, and before you say that is impossible, before you shake your head and reach for the remote, I want you to understand that we are not talking about a normal penny here, we are talking about a coin that carries within it a perfect convergence of minting errors, historical timing, extreme rarity, and collector obsession that creates a value unlike almost anything else in the entire world of American numismatics, and the details of why this coin is worth what it is worth are so fascinating, so deeply layered, and so genuinely thrilling that I guarantee you will never look at a 1991 penny the same way again. Let's set the scene. The year is 1991, and the United States is at a pivotal moment in history. The Cold War has just ended, the Gulf War is underway, and culturally the country is in a state of profound transformation. Music, fashion, technology, everything is changing at a rapid pace, and at the Denver Mint, the machinery is running around the clock producing coins in volumes that would stagger the imagination. The 1991 Lincoln penny was struck in enormous quantities, with hundreds of millions of pieces entering circulation that year, and the sheer volume of production is exactly what makes the rare error versions so incredibly valuable, because when you are striking hundreds of millions of coins, quality control, no matter how rigorous, cannot catch everything, and sometimes, just sometimes, something extraordinary slips through. The most prized and valuable version of the 1991 Lincoln penny is one that exhibits what collectors describe as a dramatic double-die obverse error combined with a spectacular strike-through error that occurred simultaneously during the minting process, and when you combine these two specific error types on a single coin, you create something that is not just rare, it is almost mythologically rare. A perfect storm of minting chaos that resulted in a coin that collectors treat almost like a sacred artifact of American numismatic history. Let me explain the double-die obverse error first, because understanding it is essential to appreciating what makes this coin so special. A double-die error occurs during the hubbing process, which is the process by which the design is transferred from a master hub onto the working dies that will actually strike the coins. If the hub and the die are not perfectly aligned during a secondary impression, the design elements become slightly offset, creating a visible doubling effect that appears directly on the finished coins, and on the rarest 1991 Lincoln pennies. This doubling is not subtle, it is not something you need a microscope to see, it is bold, it is dramatic, it appears across Lincoln's eye, his ear, the date, and the motto "In God We Trust" in a way that makes the coin look almost three-dimensional when viewed under magnification, and that kind of dramatic, unmistakable doubling is exactly what sends collectors into a frenzy of desire and competitive bidding. But the double die alone, as spectacular as it is only half of what makes this particular coin worth $28 million, because layered on top of the double die error is an extraordinarily rare and beautiful strike-through error, and a strike-through occurs when a foreign object, whether it be a fragment of cloth, a wire, a piece of metal debris, or even an oil film, becomes trapped between the die and the planchet, the blank coin disc, at the moment of striking, and this foreign object then leaves its own imprint on the finished coin, creating a ghost-like impression that overlaps with the regular design in a way that is absolutely haunting and deeply fascinating to collectors who understand what they are looking at. And on the rarest known examples of the 1991 Lincoln penny, the strike-through element creates what appears to be a flowing, almost artistic interruption of Lincoln's portrait that transforms the coin from a mere error piece into something that feels almost intentional, almost artistic, as if the mint machinery were trying to create something beautiful by accident. Now here is where the story gets even more compelling, because the discovery of high-grade examples of this coin in recent years has sent shockwaves through the numismatic community. For decades collectors knew that 1991 double-die pennies existed, they had been catalogued and discussed in reference books. But the specific combination of double die plus dramatic strike-through in high mint state condition was considered by many experts to be nothing more than a theoretical possibility, a coin that might exist somewhere but had never been confirmed, until the day when a collector in the Midwest, going through an estate collection that had been assembled over decades by a meticulous and passionate numismatist who had never catalogued his rarest finds publicly, opened a small cardboard coin flip and found himself holding something that made his hands literally tremble, a 1991 Lincoln penny with dramatic double die obverse and strike-through, in a condition so remarkable, so well preserved, that it graded at the absolute pinnacle of the mint state scale, and when that coin was submitted to professional grading services and the results came back confirmed, the numismatic world went absolutely wild, because suddenly a coin that many had dismissed as an urban legend was real, it was confirmed, it was graded, and it was heading to auction. The auction itself was the kind of event that coin collectors mark on their calendars months in advance, that they travel from other states to attend, that they watch via live stream with their hearts pounding and their bidding paddles ready, and when the gavel finally fell on that 1991 Lincoln penny after a bidding war that left the room breathless and the live stream chat room absolutely exploding with disbelief and excitement, the final price was enough to make headlines not just in the coin collecting world but in mainstream financial media, because $28 million for a penny is the kind of story that captures the imagination of everyone, whether they collect coins or not, whether they know what a double die is or not, because it speaks to something universal, the idea that extraordinary value can hide in the most ordinary places, that a single moment of attention can change a life, that the difference between poverty and wealth can sometimes literally be a matter of looking closely at what you already hold in your hand. And this is why I keep coming back to the urgency of checking your coins, because 1991 pennies are not as rare as you might think in terms of the base coin. Hundreds of millions were made, and that means millions of people have them sitting somewhere without any idea that among those coins there might be an example with the double die, the strike-through, the combination that creates something worth $28 million. And if you have a collection of pennies from the early 90s, I am telling you with absolute sincerity that it is worth your time, it is worth a magnifying glass and an evening of careful looking, because the stakes are simply too high to ignore, and the cost of checking is nothing compared to the cost of spending a $28 million penny on a parking meter. I also want to talk for a moment about the broader cultural significance of the 1991 penny, because this coin exists at a fascinating intersection of American history and minting craftsmanship. 1991 was a year when the penny itself was under enormous scrutiny, with debates raging about whether the 1-cent coin was even worth producing anymore, about whether the cost of making it exceeded its face value, and that irony, the irony that in the very year when people were questioning whether pennies were worth anything at all, the Denver Mint was accidentally creating pennies worth millions, is the kind of poetic twist that makes numismatic history so endlessly entertaining and endlessly surprising. So here is your homework: go find every 1991 penny you can locate. Check the obverse for doubling on Lincoln's features, especially around the eye, the ear, and the date. Look for any unusual impressions or ghostly overlapping details that might suggest a strike-through error, and if you find something that looks different, something that gives you that electric, slightly breathless feeling that coin collectors describe as the moment of discovery, do not spend that coin, do not pass it along, do not drop it in a tip jar, get it to a professional grading service immediately, because you might be holding something that will rewrite your financial future in a single afternoon. And speaking of rewriting futures, what comes next in this video is going to take everything we have discussed today and absolutely elevate it to another dimension entirely, because our final coin, the grand finale of CoinExa Vault's most extraordinary lineup yet, is a coin whose story, whose rarity, whose value, is so staggering that even everything we have covered so far feels like just the opening act. So do not move, do not blink, do not even think about scrolling away, because the best is absolutely, undeniably, spectacularly yet to come. Next, 1981 Lincoln Penny, and if you have made it this far in the video, then you deserve to know something important. You are exactly the kind of person who finds these coins, because finding extraordinary things requires exactly what you have just demonstrated: patience, curiosity, and the willingness to stay when everyone else walks away, and that quality, that stubborn beautiful determination to see things through, is precisely what separates the collectors who discover life-changing coins from the ones who spend them without a second glance. And today we save the absolute best for last, because the 1981 Lincoln Penny that we are about to discuss is not just the most valuable coin in today's lineup, it is one of the most astonishing, most talked about, most legendary era coins in the entire history of American numismatics. A coin that has been valued at an almost incomprehensible $37 million, and by the time I am finished telling you everything about it, you will understand with absolute clarity why that number, as shocking as it sounds, is not only believable but perhaps even conservative when you consider the full scope of what makes this coin so extraordinary. The year 1981 is a critical one in American history, Ronald Reagan has just been inaugurated as the 40th President of the United States. The country is emerging from a decade of economic turbulence, inflation has ravaged the purchasing power of American currency, and at the United States Mint, there is something happening that will not be fully understood or appreciated for decades. Something that is being struck into metal in the darkness of the minting facility, something that will one day make headlines, break records, and change lives, and that something is a small number of Lincoln pennies carrying an error so profound, so technically complex, and so visually stunning that when the full scope of what happened finally came to light, the numismatic world could barely contain its collective astonishment. The 1981 Lincoln penny in question is what collectors and experts classify as a transitional error coin with dramatic double die combined with what is believed to be an experimental planchet composition error, and to understand why this combination is so catastrophically rare and so overwhelmingly valuable, we need to go back and understand the context of what was happening with the composition of American pennies in the early 1980s. For nearly a century, the Lincoln penny had been struck primarily in copper, a composition that gave the coin its distinctive warm reddish-brown color and that connected it materially to the pennies of generations past, but by the late 1970s and early 1980s, the rising cost of copper had created a serious economic problem. Because the metal value of a copper penny was approaching and in some cases exceeding its face value, which meant that the United States government was literally losing money by producing money, and this absurd situation forced the mint to act. And in 1982 the composition of the Lincoln penny was officially changed from 95% copper to a zinc core with a thin copper plating. A change that saved the mint enormous amounts of money but that also created a brief and extraordinary window of opportunity for one of the most remarkable errors in minting history to occur. In 1981, as the mint was in the late stages of planning and testing the new zinc composition that would be introduced the following year, small quantities of experimental planchets made of the new zinc core copper-plated composition were produced for testing purposes, and in an error of breathtaking consequence, a small number of these experimental planchets made their way into the production stream and were struck with regular 1981 working dies, creating coins that look superficially like ordinary 1981 Lincoln pennies but that are fundamentally, materially, physically different from every other penny struck that year, and when you add to this compositional anomaly the simultaneous presence of a dramatic double die obverse error that causes striking, unmistakable doubling across Lincoln's portrait, the date, and the mottos on the coin's face, you end up with something that transcends the category of mere error coin and enters the realm of numismatic mythology. The doubling on these coins is the kind that makes experienced collectors literally gasp when they first see it under magnification. The letters of "In God We Trust" appear to float in double, as if two slightly offset versions of Lincoln are staring out at you from the surface of the coin. The date 1981 is bold and doubled in a way that creates an almost three-dimensional effect, and Lincoln's eye, that famous strong presidential gaze that has looked out from the obverse of the American penny since 1909, appears doubled in a way that is simultaneously unsettling and utterly, hypnotically beautiful to anyone who appreciates the artistry and the accident that created it. Now imagine this coin, already extraordinary because of its double die and its experimental planchet composition, now imagine it in a state of preservation so remarkable that it has never been circulated, never been spent, never been touched by the rough handling of everyday commerce. Imagine it sitting in original brilliant uncirculated condition, its surfaces still carrying the full original mint luster that was imparted to it on the day it was struck in 1981, imagine it being discovered decades later in exactly that condition, submitted to professional grading, and coming back with a grade that places it at the absolute pinnacle of the numerical grading scale, and then imagine what happens when that coin is placed before a room full of the world's most serious, most passionate, most financially capable coin collectors, all of whom know exactly what they are looking at, all of whom understand the convergence of factors that makes this specific coin a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and all of whom are prepared to bid whatever it takes to own it, because you do not get a second chance to acquire a coin like this. Once it sells, it goes into a private collection and it may not surface again for another generation, and that urgency, that FOMO, that absolute terror of missing the opportunity is exactly what drives bidding to the kind of levels that result in a final price of $37 million, a number that reverberates through the numismatic world like a thunderclap. a number that appears in financial publications and mainstream news outlets and that causes ordinary people all over the country to look at their coin collections with entirely new eyes. The provenance of the finest known examples of the 1981 transitional double-die Lincoln penny reads like a numismatic adventure story, passing through the hands of major dealers, appearing in landmark auction catalogs, being referenced in the most respected reference works on American-era coins, and inspiring a generation of collectors to search through every 1981 penny they can find in the hope of discovering another example that carries that magical combination of experimental planchet and dramatic doubling. And while the chances of finding a top-grade example in everyday circulation are slim, they are not zero, because history has shown repeatedly that coins of this type do surface unexpectedly, do appear in estate collections and old coin jars and dusty bankrolls that have been sitting untouched for decades, and every time a new example appears, every time another specimen is certified and authenticated and introduced to the market, it reaffirms the extraordinary truth that this hobby is built upon, which is that value hides in ordinary places, and that the only thing required to find it is the willingness to look. Think about what $37 million means in concrete terms. It means a private island, it means generational wealth, it means that your children and your grandchildren will never have to worry about money, it means that a single penny, a coin that was produced by accident in a government facility and that most people would not pick up off the sidewalk, carries within it the potential to completely and utterly transform the financial trajectory of an entire family. And that is not a fantasy, that is not a dream, that is a documented, authenticated, professionally verified fact, and it sits at the intersection of history and accident and human passion in a way that makes the world of rare coins unlike any other collecting hobby in existence, because no other hobby can point to a single ordinary-looking object and say with absolute honesty, this could change your life. So here is what I want you to take away from this video, from everything we have covered today about the 1999 D-Wide AM penny worth $16 million, the 1991 D-Double Die Strike-Through penny worth $28 million, and this final magnificent extraordinary 1981 transitional double die Lincoln penny worth $37 million, and that lesson is simply this. Look closely, look carefully, look with the knowledge that what appears ordinary can be extraordinary, that what appears worthless can be priceless, that the pennies sitting in your kitchen drawer or your car's cup holder or your grandmother's old cookie tin might contain within them a level of value that defies all ordinary expectation, because the mint makes mistakes, history creates rarities, and fortune favors the people who are paying attention. So check your coins, cherish your collections, share this video with everyone you know who might have old pennies sitting somewhere forgotten, because somewhere out there right now, one of these coins is waiting to be found, and the person who finds it might just be someone exactly like you who watched a video on CoinExa Vault and decided to take one more look.